I'm Ken Harbaugh, host of Warriors in Their Own Words. In partnership with the Honor Project, we've brought this podcast back at a time when our nation needs these stories more than ever. Warriors in Their Own Words is our attempt to present an unvarnished, unsanitized truth of what we have asked of those who wear our country's uniform. Thank you for listening, and by doing so, honoring those who have served. Today, in the first of a two-part episode, we'll hear from Lieutenant Colonel Winston M. Roche. Lieutenant Colonel Roche served in the National Guard during World War I. He was 93 years old when he recorded this interview.
I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel Winston M. Roche of the United States Army 7th Engineers of the 5th Division, Regular Division. I'm 93 years old, and I served in World War I for over 22 months. And then when I came out after the armistice, I enlisted in the National Guard and retired in 1943. All we had were a few regulars who were on the Mexican border fighting the Mexican bandits who were continually sniping at Texas and those border states. And I suppose that they had desires on getting California and the West Coast back into their hands. But they were rebels and they never lasted long. They just were a continued nuisance. They would come in over the border. And I served in the last portions of the famous 7th Cavalry organization that was on the border under John J. Pershing, who later became the commanding general of all World War I troops. I think he was the first 5-star general that we had. But basically, it was a real citizens' army, and it was composed mostly of young men, in their teens, up to 25 or so, that were in business, school, or just graduating from school, and on the farms. Of course, I could ride a horse. I was raised on a farm, but I knew nothing about cavalry warfare. So it's just the background of what the officers faced, the terrific job that they had ahead of them to train us and bring us up to a stature that would withstand modern warfare. And they, of course, knew a hell of a lot more than we did about what we were going to face in France. Now, that war had been going on since 1914, and we didn't go in until April the 6th, 1917. And I went in late May in 17. So naturally, we were aggressive, cocky, well-protected kids. We all had been brought up by good families. We went to church. All of my friends went to church. I still go. I just came home from church. And we had ideal boyhoods. We had all the things, swimming holes and everything, nothing technologically advanced or anything like that. We had the telephones that you rang at turned a bell on to talk through and stuff like that. And so our movie theaters, all of the pictures were accompanied by a pianist. And so when the action got wild and furious on the cowboys and Indians or the soldiers and Indians, the pianist would go into some rock and rolling deal and make a lot of noise and try to raise your excitement. And he'd be banging on the little piano, and this would affect us. This would instill in us the desire to get on one of those horses and chase those Indians and get into the fray. Then the magazines would carry once in a while pictures, wonderful pictures drawn by artists of the action on the Western Front. And you show the dashing cavalrymen or the beautiful white and black horses chasing the enemy with their sabers flashing in the sun. And this all had terrific impact on me. And I saw myself on one of those horses chasing after the dirty Huns. I enlisted right after getting out of high school. By permission of my daddy, wrote a letter to the commandant here in the old Pacific Electric building on 6th and Main Streets, and he put him to work as the superintendent of the street maintenance department. So naturally, he was in politics. All politicians having sons wanted a boy in the Army or the Navy. And so I got his permission, and that's how I got in. I was sent to San Francisco, Angel Island, through the Presidio, got my uniform and everything. Then I was sent from there down to Camp Houston in San Antonio, Texas. There I was transferred to the early Air Force. When they found out that I was specializing in mathematics in school, I had a bent for math. So I was desirous in my mind when I went in the Army that, of course, I didn't dream of any Air Force activity because we didn't have an Air Force. And I, of course, had seen the pictures of the daring young men and their flying machines and their dogfights and all that stuff. But it never dawned on me until I was transferred to the Air Force, and I learned at Kelly Field there, adjacent to Camp Upton. So I qualified in JN4 Jennies with the OX5 engine in them, famous Curtiss engine. And then when they got to the point where they got enough organized to find out that I was a mathematician, even at that age, 17, where they just arbitrarily transferred me to the engineers. They had a fighter, single-wing, low-wing monoplane fighter, Thomas Morse Scout. I even flew that on a couple of short hops, and that aircraft was so mean and treacherous, it killed more men than could qualify in it. So they had to let that go, and later on they imported some Spads and Newports and some DH-4s, the de Havilland, and it was more sophisticated. It was an English aircraft. And the English and the French by this time had some good airplanes, Spad Newports. English had the Bristol 5s and the Sopwith Camels, and so they were way ahead of us. We were just kindergarten and everything. So I went where I was told. The last thing my dad told me, said, be a good soldier. So I, being a good kid, I minded him. And all through the war, I remember what my dad told me, be a good soldier. And I was.
With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Too busy with your end-of-summer goals to cook but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to crushing your goals. Level up with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This August, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/warriors50 and use code warriors50 to get 50% off. That's code warriors50 at factormeals.com/warriors50 to get 50% off.
I became a trainee, engineer trainee. Was sent immediately into we had earthworks trenches at the camp in San Antonio. And we learned how to build trenches and fire steps and how to build them out of nothing, just dig them up out of the dirt and get support. And we had to in those days. Dig a hole was one of the first things you learned to do. And so I progressed on through. And of course, I was in France 30 days after I enlisted here. I was 3,000 miles from home in 30 days. We went to training camps right away. That meant it took us 14 days to cross in a 13-ship convoy. Didn't lose any. We got across okay. We landed at Liverpool first and trained at Winchester for a while with the British troops. And then we were sent, and I landed at Le Havre. And that was an all-night trip across that channel in those days. But let me get on with my training. I got my training mostly in France. And, of course, I was working with French troops because we had no American training camps there yet. And I trained with 2 different French divisions, and I served under Marshal Giraud, and I served under Pétain, P-E-T-A-I-N, and, of course, under the direction of Joffre, Marshal Joffre, we used to call him. Most of my instruction came from French and British officers. And when we went into action, the first action was in 1918. We would be sent up to the line with nothing but our sidearm and our trench knives as observers. And we would go along with the British or the French, whichever we were assigned to, and we would watch them. We didn't participate unless we were attacked. Of course, then we would do our best to shoot at the enemy. But we were students, actually, learning how to build redoubts and trenches. And in my entire point of action with the American Army, I never saw the beauty of France. Everything I went through, the path that I took, all the towns we went through were devastated. They were just hooks, standing bare walls. All the fields were shot up. The forests we went through were mostly just bare stacks or trunks towering into the sky with all the leaves shot off, most of the branches shot off. So to us, France was a completely devastated country. The trenches had to have what they call observation trenches. Now, the observation trench is a thin, narrow, one-man style of highway out into no man's land. You would dig under the wire. And of course, remember I told you we had no radio, nothing like that. So we were equipped with flares, white and red flares. There'd be a man out there standing guard, and you could be set upon any moment from raiding parties. They send a group of 10 troops out. So, and they would try to take a prisoner, to get into our sector and get a prisoner or two and take them back with them and get some information. And so we had 2 men in these observation trenches who went out every so many hundreds of yards. There'd be an observation trench out there. And 1 man would get the information, try to make an estimation on how many there were in the raiding party, and we'd get back, 1 man to go back to the main dugout and tell them what was going on, and then they'd have a soldier from the nearest supporting observation point shoot a flare so as not to disturb these people in front of us, if you get what I mean, because the action was in our area. And when that flare went off, the second or third one down on the other side would shoot a flare up to light up no man's land so we could zero in on this raiding party. And there was some vicious hand-to-hand combat out there in the dark sometime when you couldn't see much more than 10 feet or so from you. Black night, or maybe it might be raining. So to talk about combat and tell you what it's like is impossible. Think for a moment, how would you feel if I told you now and there was someone in my driveway who was threatening us, and I gave you one of my old trench knives and told you to go out there and stick this guy if he had to be stuck. If he wouldn't leave, stick him in the stomach. You don't think about killing a man per se. My reactions was just an object. There was a dark object out there right in front of me, and I had to pump 2 or 3 shots into it, which I did because I couldn't stop and think I might be killing some father or son. You can't think about those things. It's either him or you. That's the main thing that kept me going when I got into, I had some vicious hand-to-hand combat, and but this time I was a man. I wasn't a kid anymore. You grow up overnight when you're under fire in a situation with these crashing shells all around you, and the constant noise, the misery, the uncomfortableness. You're either always sleepy as hell, hungry, or tired. So to talk about and think about killing a man, you don't. You just do your job and take care of the enemy to keep him from getting you or your buddies. The minute you do that, you're a dead duck, because you're going to hesitate a second and let him get off the first shot or the first jab. You got to go after him and do it first. You got to be aggressive, and you adopt an attitude, a fatalistic attitude of You don't know whether you're going to be here tomorrow or not. And so you live for today. You never make any plans. And we were instructed, try not to make too good a friendship with. Be friendly to everybody, of course, and cooperative, but don't make any, if you can help it, don't make anybody buddy, because you might be transferred the next day, or you might be killed. Then you'd be devastated and you wouldn't be a good soldier anymore. You have to be a professional. You have to learn that it's either him or you. And that will sustain you. And then you have your own private thoughts of your home, your loved ones, the wonderful comforts you've left behind. And it gets to the point, if you've been there 6 or 8 months in almost constant action and this continual deafening noise, you can't believe how this affects you. Now, you've heard of PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome from Vietnam. I know what they mean. What they're talking about is shell shock. And we had it in gobs in World War I. I had 2 bad attacks of it, and it affected my nerves, and I've been like this ever since I came out of the Army. This is post-traumatic syndrome, and it's a big deal in Vietnam. We came home with no treatment whatsoever for it, but that's another story. So we had everything. We were taken in like a bunch of city kids by a bunch of slick gamblers, by the vicissitudes of war, in the French villages, when we'd have to be withdrawn to replace our casualties, to replace our ammunition, to replace a lost gas mask or something. The troops would be besieged by the French women, young and old. There were no Frenchmen in the villages, the little villages. And as the front moved, they would come back to their homes and try to pick up life before they were driven out. That's a homing instinct that all of you have. And everybody wants to go home sooner or later. We were all suckers for these people. And I was no angel by any means, but I was a good kid. And I had seen many of my comrades put up against the firing squad for deserting a post under fire or some other action that they engaged in detrimental to the safety of the Army. So I've seen my own people executed. Okay, now there are basically 3 types of artillery shells in my experiences. The 155s, that's 155 millimeter, and our main backup gun was the French 75 millimeter. And then the 155. 155s were used for demolition in the rear, support bases, ammunition dumps, roads preceding an assault, and things of this kind. And then we had the 4.09, we had the 75 millimeter, and we had the machine guns and the mortars, Stokes mortars and things like this. But there's an old saying in the Army, you never hear the one that hits you. So if you hear them coming, you get to the point where you think, well, I hear that sucker and it's not going to hit me. And so you hit the dirt or get in the trench and duck, or you get in a shell hole, and then you have the concussion. And I've actually had my helmet blown off with a chin strap under my chin. And as I pointed out, they always say you don't ever have to worry about the bullet that's going to hit you because you never hear it. If it kills you, it kills you. You have to be a fatalist. And you get so used to the buzzing of bullets, the explosions of shells, and the funny zinging sound of a mortar coming at you. And those were the things that were every day, just like going out and having breakfast. When you come out of the dugout or from wherever you were sleeping, you were back into your world. You felt comfortable. Actually, you felt comfortable. Of course, now I don't mean that it gave the impression that we were happy to be there, but this is what we had to do, and we knew we were going to be there until we were either wounded or killed or the war stopped. So this is your life. If you know you're going over in the morning, you sleep fitfully because you know that this could be your last night on earth as a mortal. You really feel that way. You really think, maybe this is my time. As I say, your stomach is in butterflies, and if you're not scared, you're in trouble. There's something wrong with you because, boy, you better be scared and you better duck and you better hit those shell holes when you get a chance. And just like trying to tell you how good a good glass of beer is on a hot day, you can't explain it. You have to be there.
That was World War I veteran Lieutenant Colonel Winston Roche. We'll hear more from him in the next episode of Warriors in Their Own Words. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast to see part 2 in your feed. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review. It really helps other listeners find the show. Warriors in Their Own Words is a production of Evergreen Podcasts in partnership with the Honor Project. Our producer is Isabel Robertson. Assistant producer is Declan Roars. Audio engineer is Sean Roll Hoffman. Special thanks to Evergreen executive producers Joan Andrews, Michael DeAloia, and David Moss. I'm Ken Harbaugh, and this is Warriors in Their Own Words.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.